Good afternoon. So we're just going to wait for people to join and then we'll start today's live. Good afternoon for those of you who are joining in. We'll just wait a couple more seconds, so we've got a few more people and then we'll start. Okay, so I think we're going to start now. I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Payzee Mahmood. Thank you for those of you who are joining in, and really looking forward to having those conversations today with you, this really important conversation around child marriage. So for those of you who don't know me, I campaign against harmful practices such as FGM, child marriage and forced marriage. And I'm very, very passionate about ending child marriage for several reasons we'll go into a little bit later on. And today we're going to be talking about that and hopefully about how you can all take action against this so that we can make the world a better place for girls and women. So today I am really, really honored to be joined by somebody who I have so much respect for. Mabel van Oranje is the CEO of the Elders. She founded GNB, which is Girls Not Brides, in 2011, and she's on the advisory board for the Malala Fund. I could go on and on about how incredible Mabel's work is to the human rights field, but I'm going to hand it over and introduce Mabel into this conversation. So bear with me whilst I add Mabel. Bear with me one moment. I apologize. We're having some technical difficulties. So just bear with me whilst I add Mabel. Thank you for bearing with us. Okay, so I'm going to Mabel into the conversation now. Technical difficulties, you can never ever not expect them. So Mabel is just joining us. Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. So excited to be having you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I really look forward to our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you. So Mabel, I just gave a brief introduction into who you are. I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself from you.
I'm actually going to take my glasses off because now that we have the technology working, I think it talks nicer this way. So I've been an activist for human rights for more than 25 years. And I have become engaged and active on the issue of ending child marriage only about a decade ago. And that is because, to be honest, until about a decade ago, I didn't even know that there was an issue, a really big issue that's child marriage. And it's quite remarkable because, you know, the world pays so much attention to getting every girl into school, to making sure that girls have access to sexual reproductive health services, etc. And yet in all these debates, in the 15 or so years that I had been working previously on development issues and rights issues, the issue of child marriage really never came up. And then in 2010, as I was working with the Elders, you know, the organization that Nelson Mandela created, we kind of stumbled across the issue of child marriage. And I remember thinking, I wonder how big that issue is. I never hear about it. It can't be that big. Looked it up and discovered that 12 million girls every year get married. I mean, 12 million. It's like
shocking.
A girl every 2 seconds. Imagine this. One girl, another one, and it goes on and on and on. And for me, that was that kind of light bulb moment where I figured, wait, if there's an issue that is that big and that is not getting the attention it deserves, then in a way we're not really fair to these girls, but also not to ourselves. Because how can we claim that we want all girls to get an education if girls are actually pulled out of school to get married? How can we claim that we want to stop maternal mortality issues when we know that 12, 13, 14-year-old girls who get pregnant are much more likely to have complications or die in childbirth? And so for me, that was really the moment where I decided I want to do everything that I can to help to end this. But I also very much know that nobody can make change alone. And so that's where it all started then. And where this whole building of a community of activists started. And I'm so delighted to be talking to you because in my eyes, Payzee, you're really one of the leading advocates in the UK who's trying to create change there.
Thank you, Mabel. I am trying. And as you said, we can definitely not do this alone. So we all play a huge role in, doing this together and making a change collectively. So you mentioned briefly Girls Not Brides. So just to note for the audience who are listening, Girls Not Brides is a global partnership of over 1,000 civil society organizations who are committed to ending child marriage. And there is also an umbrella under that of the UK sector, which is Girls Not Brides UK. And ICRO, who I work very closely with, is one of the organizations under that. So Mabel, let's you covered the topic of child marriage and just how many millions of girls it's affecting. So why is this happening? Why is this an issue in the first place?
Well, I think before we look at that, I think we should all just take a moment to think about what it means to become a child bride. And maybe I should mention a few things that I've seen very often on my trips, which is you see these young girls who happen to be in school, and then one day they come out of school and their parents tell them, look, tomorrow you're going to get married. So the kind of marriages we're talking about are not the kind of white dress, happy moments that in the West we often think about. But these girls, basically, for them then getting married, it's the day they have to leave school, basically. I'll never forget a girl who I met in Ethiopia who literally said that. We asked her, how was your wedding day? And she said, my wedding day was the day I had to leave school. And then they go often off to live with their in-laws with, they get husbands that they didn't select, who often tend to be a little older. And then basically their fertility often becomes their biggest value in a way. And so you see that girls who physically are still children themselves then get pregnant. But before we talk about the causes, I think, Payzee, I'm describing some of what I've seen and what this means for individual girls. But I think it would be nice actually if you could maybe say a few words, because you yourself are a so-called survivor of child marriage, and I think your story is so powerful, and I think it's so easy to think, oh, this only happens in faraway countries, because this is truly happening all over the world, across cultures, across religions, across continents, countries, but it is also happening in the UK, it's happening in the United States of America. So if you don't mind, may I suggest that you tell a little bit about your story before we then go to the big picture and why and how we can do something about it?
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right. That will really drive this home, because as you said, so many people think this is happening somewhere far away. But I actually grew up in London, one of the most vibrant cities in the world. And at the age of 15, the conversation of marriage was already starting in my household. And I was then chosen as a sort of token for my father to regain his honor in our community. And my marriage wasn't, as you described, a happy day, a fairy tale. I was told I was getting married. And as a child, I really didn't have, the strength, the voice, or even I didn't think I had the choice to say no. I just saw my marriage happening as something I had to do because this is what my parents had decided. And for me, at the age of 16, when actually I was just thinking about my education and the next stage, you know, going to college and having friends and all these exciting opportunities that would unfold right in front of me, all of that was completely crushed. And I was, you know, I met somebody who my father told me that I was marrying. I met him once, and my, you know, a very dark reality unfolded before me. My childhood disappeared, and I was coerced into marrying this man who was much older than me. So there was automatically that power dynamic. And, you know, I lost 2 years of my life and far beyond that, because the thing is with child marriage, it's not something that will only affect you there and then. We're talking about a lifelong harm that stays with you, the trauma, you know, the opportunities. As a young girl, all my dreams were taken away from me. And you know, we also have to talk about the abuse that children suffer in these situations, because we're talking about, you know, mental abuse, we're talking about sexual abuse, we're talking about physical abuse. And there's such a power dynamic that it's absolutely impossible for a child to thrive in any way in a relationship like that. So unfortunately, this topic we're talking about, I know firsthand just how damaging it was to me, to my life, to my mental health. And I'm 33 now, and I'm still actually on the road to recovery. And my campaigning journey has only started a year ago, because that long harm that I went through in my child marriage has stayed with me for so long, and I'm still trying to rebuild myself and rebuild my life. So that's really the reality of what we're talking about when we say child marriage.
And I do think well, I should maybe just say to everybody, if you want to hear more about Payzee's story, I highly recommend that you look for her TED Talk, which is I've now listened and seen it a few times, and it's incredibly powerful. And I think it really, you know, shows why it is so important that we end child marriage. But maybe we should go back to the bigger question. So, if I remember correctly, you were asking why this is happening, no?
Yes, exactly. Because I find that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I find sometimes when I talk to people about this, it's almost a surprise that they find out child marriage exists. So I think, you know, for the audience perhaps listening as well, let's talk about why this is happening. Why is this such a huge issue in today's society?
Well, what I found interesting is that when you go to different places, you will see that the reasons why it's happening are different. And that varies not only between countries or, you know, between countries, but also within countries. So I've seen girls who get married because of tradition. The parents do it because that's how it happens in their community, generation after generation. And they don't realize that actually the harms of child marriage are much bigger than the good they think they're doing. Because I don't think any parents want to harm their children. I've seen cases where this happens because of issues related to sexual safety, the fear that a girl will get pregnant before she gets married. There are cases where it happens because of economic circumstances. So you will either you will see that by marrying a daughter off, there is you know, one less mouth to feed. Or in the case of India, the family of the girl pays a dowry to the family of the boy, and the younger the girl and the less educated she is, the less the dowry payment is. So there is an incentive for parents to marry their daughters off at a young age. So these reasons are different. We shouldn't forget that they ultimately all are related to the gender inequality that we're suffering throughout the world. I mean, the number of times that I've heard people say like, oh, but you know, girls are a burden, you need to get rid of them as quickly as you can. It's just really, really painful. So gender inequality is really, really underlaying a whole lot of this. But and for example, in your story, obviously it had a lot to do with the honor of the family.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Which is in some communities very strong. And so what's interesting is that, as I said, it can be that in the same country, the reasons why this is happening are in different provinces or in different locations actually slightly different, which also means why it is so incredibly important that you can raise awareness globally, but ultimately change needs to happen on the ground. in the lives of the girls, in the lives of their families, and in the lives of the communities. And in some cases, and people find it tough sometimes. We like in life always to simplify things. So
Right.
simplify the problem in 2 sentences and find the solution with one pill or one, the silver bullet, whatever. And in this case, that doesn't work. So you need to really understand, because in some places, the way to keep girls out of marriage is to make sure that there's education.
Yes.
In some cases, it requires working with religious or traditional leaders who have a lot of influence over the community and can help the community. Once they understand that child marriage is helpful, they can help the community to realize this. In some cases, it's really helping girls to realize that they have rights, and and that this isn't normal. In some cases, I mean, there are stories of like very simple things, like there was a place where they brought solar lamps into the community, which allowed the mothers in the families to make some money with charging mobile phones, and that money they could use to then buy school supplies for their daughters, so the daughters could actually go to school. Sometimes it's about providing contraceptives. So and this is why, I mean, you were describing Girls Not Brides as a partnership of civil society organizations. And the whole thinking behind Girls Not Brides is this idea of, like, in the end, if we want to end child marriage, yes, we need global awareness. Yes, we need a target in the Sustainable Development Goals, which we did get, that says end child marriage by 2030. Yes, we need UN resolutions. Yes, we need government commitments, because laws and policies, they all have an influence, an impact. But in the end, change needs to happen locally. And by working with civil society and Girls Not Brides, the 1,400 members that we have in more than 100 countries, these guys know what's going on the ground. And so by empowering them, they can then help to make change happen.
Absolutely. So I guess what you're saying, and I completely agree, you've really got to look at the driving factors behind it in those communities, in local communities. And I've heard you say this actually in your talks. Ultimately, we can't achieve gender equality without ending child marriage.
No, I don't see how we can do that. I really don't see how we can do it. And it's interesting because it's not just about the girls. I've seen some communities where the arguments to create change were not so much because they cared about the rights of the girls and the feeling like this is not good for the girls, but once they realized that if you keep a girl in school and delay marriage till the age of 18, that then the girl will have is better educated, will have a better earning power. Because each additional year of school increases your earning power during your lifetime by 15% or so. And that we also know that women who earn money tend to invest it in their families. And so in the end, the whole community, all families benefit from keeping girls longer in school. And so sometimes the change happens not because the community wants to do well for the girls, but because they realize there's a self-interest to do this.
Right, a selfish benefit for them, yeah.
As long as it works, then
absolutely.
I'm happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you described the reasons like perfectly well, and for me, I find as well there's often honor-based abuse which links very closely to child marriage, and in my case, it was definitely a big driving factor. I was seen, just as my sister was seen as a token to actually selfishly gain something for my father, which he felt like he lost. And I think something that I find really, really key to changing the way people think of child marriage is education and training. And as you said, on the ground, I can't say, as a young girl growing up, I really understood the concept of marriage. And I think a lot of, young people don't really understand what marriage is and what it really entails, and that it's a life-changing commitment. So I think education in schools, awareness in families and conversations just need to continue. We need to just continue having that conversation. So you know about this. I'm not sure if the audience do know, but I've actually been trying, since coming out and telling my own story, I've been publicly speaking about how the law in the UK doesn't actually protect children against this. And this is something that we know is a problem in a lot of countries. And of course, it's not as simple as just fixing the law and just changing the law, but it plays a massive, massive role in what actually people are doing on the ground. You know, what people think is okay and what they believe they can do with girls' lives and their choices. So in regards to laws, what, I mean, of course, you have a global picture on this. What countries in particular do you feel are more passionate about this change and that are driving towards that?
I think we should distinguish two things. One is the laws, and the other one's being people being passionate about change. Because there are countries that have beautiful laws, like India, that for I think about 100 years now has had a law that doesn't allow for child marriage to happen under the age of 18 in case of girls, if I remember correctly, and I believe 21 in the case of boys. But anyway, there is the 18 line is there, but at the same time, India is the country with the highest absolute number of child marriages. So having a law doesn't always result in ending child marriage. It can sometimes customary laws are stronger. We've also seen cases where you have laws, but with lots of exceptions, and that's what is the case in the UK. But before we go to the UK, I actually think it's interesting to mention that until about a year and a half ago, in every state in the United States of America, you could get married under the age of 18, either because there was no minimum age at all, or because the minimum age in specific states was 12 or 16 or whatever, or in those states where 18 was the minimum age, there were exception clauses. So if you had the permission from a judge or from Paris, then you could get married, so, which is quite remarkable. Well, but as you know better than I do, in England and Wales, there is a law that says 18 is the minimum age of marriage, unless there is parental consent, and then girls can get married, and boys, I guess, can get married at the age of 16. Well, I think as you are an example of the damage that can do to an individual, but the numbers are not insignificant in the UK, and that's why I think it is so incredibly important that there is this campaign going on by many members of Girls Not Brides in the United Kingdom, by Girls Not Brides UK, to change the law. But maybe you should mention a little more about what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, the laws are there to protect people, but I find in this particular case with the marriage laws in the UK, so it's basically 18. So you can't get married under the age of 18 unless your parents consent to this. So if you are 16, your parents can actually consent to you getting married. And the danger in that is that consent can actually be a loophole for abuse and coercion. And as you said, my example is a perfect example of how this can happen. And in my marriage, I had my registered marriage, but I also had my Islamic non-registered marriage. So I think one of the things we need to take into account, which is, very vital for our campaign, is that there are so many unregistered marriages. And what the law needs to recognize is that what maybe have started as, a sort of like a consent and a way to protect children from making that choice decades ago, no longer fits in our society now, because we're seeing that perpetrators are abusing loopholes and are, trying in whichever way they can to take rights away. And that's exactly what's happening in the UK, which, it's shocks me that it's something that still exists right now, because we've recognized in the UK that children must stay in education until the age of 18. And I believe that, as you mentioned, in quite a lot of detail, education is key for young people, and we recognize that. And the more we learn about behavioral changes and we learn about society, this is something that has a long time ago needed change. And in the UK, we really are lagging behind, and we should be leaders in this, and we should be leaders in change and giving young people opportunities. But I feel the UK is completely lagging behind this, and that's why this campaign is so important. So for anybody who's watching who may not be familiar with the campaign,
basically we have a safeguard children and end child marriage campaign going on, which I can link down below, which is on my Instagram profile. And at the moment we have a great amount of support, but of course we need so much more. We have over 111,000 signatures of people who are agreeing that that loophole of parental consent should not exist. It should be that when you are 18, which is the age anyway, so we're asking for the loophole to be taken away. And when you decide you want to get married, and that is a decision you make yourself, you go ahead and you do that. And no other person is taking your rights and your consent and actually abusing that. So it would be great if everyone who's watching this signs the petition and shares it, because it is really, really important. And we've talked about some of the harms that child marriage has on girls in particular. We really collectively need to make this change, and it's something that can be done. It's not impossible. We can do it. It's just recognizing this harm and taking the action that we all have a responsibility. And I think, Mabel, I'm sure you'll agree, for me this is a child abuse issue. This isn't an issue that is so so alone. It's something that fits within child rights issues. It's child abuse.
So I very strongly feel that every girl should be determined whether she wants to get married in the first place, when she wants to get married, and with whom she wants to get married if she decides to get married. So I am very obviously very much in agreement with the fact that you guys and supportive of the efforts you're doing in the UK. And I think, Payzee, that you really explained well why this is so important from a child protection perspective in the UK. But I would like to add another angle to that, which people might not be aware of, is the UK actually, when the whole global efforts to end child marriage really picked up, and even before that, the UK was already supporting some programs in, among others, Ethiopia, to end child marriage. And so the UK is really, the government has really been internationally one of the champions of ending child marriage. And what was very painful to see is that at some point I think it was in 2017, in Bangladesh, they had a law that said that 18 is the minimum age of marriage. Now, Bangladesh is one of the countries with the highest percentages-wise of child marriage in the world. So, I mean, 2 out of 3 girls in Bangladesh are married before the age of 18. Now, in Bangladesh, they then decided in 2017 to change that law and to actually lower the age of marriage to 16. And there was an outcry by Girls Not Rights members in Bangladesh, international outcry, because the Girls Not Rights members in Bangladesh said, yes, please, try to put political pressure from outside on the government of Bangladesh. And one of the reasons that the government of Bangladesh used to justify lowering the age of child marriage, the formal legal age of child marriage in Bangladesh from 18 to 16, is that they said, look at what's happening in the UK. In the UK, you can get married, the UK, I mean, in England and Wales, and in Scotland, you can get married at the age of 16. So why shouldn't that be possible in our own country? So the fact that this is not very clear, and the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which is the convention that has been, adopted, supported by all countries in the world, apart from the United States. But that clearly defines as a child as somebody who's under the age of 18. So there's not much dispute, about what is the age there. And so the fact that now, the fact that in the UK this law exists, is actually also having a negative impact on efforts to end child marriage globally. It's just disturbing. And I mean, I would think in good conscience, nobody in the British Parliament or in the British government would feel that that marrying girls, while they're still children is a great thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's, as you said, it's really heartbreaking to hear that, because that's now actually putting millions of girls at risk, because a country that should be leading is failing to do that. And it's actually one of the questions that someone asked. So we can go into some of the questions we've been asked in here, and the questions that people have sent in. This is one that somebody asked: why doesn't the government want to end child marriage? And we just very confused as to why, because it's very clear this is something that we need to end. For me, what I found is we've had conversations with MPs, and we've had productive conversations, and we've had support from cross-party MPs. But the one thing that comes up constantly is that they are constantly looking at the registered marriages. And we've got to be mindful of the fact that we live in a society where there isn't just registered marriages. There are also religious marriages and marriages that happen abroad. And we've got to bear those in mind if we're looking at our society as a whole. And I found that one of the things the government is failing to recognize is they're not willing to take into account these marriages, because all they want to see is the numbers. But you can't prove numbers if the law doesn't require you to show these numbers. So we're looking at children who are going abroad and marrying. You can't see those numbers reflected when you're looking at official figures, because those marriages didn't happen in the UK. Or you'll look at marriages that are just religious and cultural, which, there are many cultures that practice these marriages. And essentially, for me, even one child is too many. And that's really what the UK government needs to see and needs to recognize, that just having one of these marriages, and I speak very clearly about my own experience. I know many other girls who've gone through this, and my sister, some of you may be familiar with my sister's story. My sister had a child marriage which actually ended in her losing her life for losing that child marriage. And unfortunately, this is something that is still happening. We are hearing of cases, up until last week, I was hearing of cases in Iran, across the world. This is something that is still happening. And the damages of child marriage are just so severe that we really need to take action. And, we will continue pushing the government. We will do everything we can to get them to recognize this.
But what I'm also sometimes, I do think they're impressive people in Parliament who are, trying to help to advance the whole legal process of changing the law forward, as I understand. But I guess there is then always the issue of, like, there's so many other issues on the agenda. And I just wanted to mention that the latest thing that is, of course, keeping people incredibly busy is the whole issue around the COVID-19 pandemic. But in a way that makes it even more urgent to work on these things, because when I look at what COVID is doing on child marriage, it is, from what we hear from our member organizations, and I've spoken with many of them, with my colleagues at Girls Not Brides, we've been talking to many of them in the last weeks or months, and the stories are really disturbing. I mean, the economic impact of COVID is driving people into poverty. And so what you see is there's again that pressure to marry daughters off, thinking that is a safe solution for these girls. While we know that, the violence in child marriages is often much higher than in normal marriages. We also see that because of school closures and the fact that in rural poor communities, there is no access to digital learning, that therefore then again, marriage becomes the best alternative. We see that supply lines of contraceptives are being disrupted. So girls, who are become the victims of rape, or, cannot longer, and then the pregnant might have to marry. So the estimates are that actually because of COVID, the child marriage rates globally will increase from the current 12 million per year to, possibly 13, 14 million a year. We might see at least 1 million, if not 2 million extra child marriages. And so what I think is very important, and that's not just in lawmaking, but also in the kind of programs that are happening, etc., that girls cannot become like the victim of the COVID crisis, and so we really need to work hard to keep the issue on the agenda. But let me stop here, because I bet there are more questions that people want to ask.
We do have a few, but just to echo what you said, absolutely. Due to COVID, this is even more urgent. It was always urgent, but this is extremely urgent now, and we all have a responsibility to do something about this. One of the other questions that we actually had was, what age can children be forced to marry, and are they all arranged?
Well, I think part of your story shows that you offered to marry, but you had no clue what you actually did. No, if I summarize it correctly, and
Absolutely.
and so that doesn't sound like voluntary to me.
No. And I think this is where we have to uh, pay close attention to coercion, because what may be, as Mabel said, what may have been presented to me as a choice was definitely not a choice. It was this bad or worse. And, you know, the consequences of me having said no to my child marriage could have actually been very bad. So it was presented as that. It was definitely not a choice. And this is why actually it's quite important for us to touch on the forced marriage law, which we have in the UK. And it's important for us to note that the forced marriage unit law cannot protect children, because what you have to do to actually have the law protect you as a forced marriage victim, you have to recognize the force. But what we're doing here is we are putting the onus on the child to recognize they are being forced. And you have to look at this from a child's scope. You love your parents, you know, you want to please your parents. How do you recognize that your loved one is forcing you to do something? Children cannot. And a lot of the times we're talking about these conservative communities, and you're brought up in a very sheltered, you know, environment. And I speak from a very personal experience. I know that I could have never said no to my parents. That wasn't an option. So I think it's very important for us to note that right now, what we have in place does not protect children, because you can't put that responsibility on the children. It is absolutely the adult's responsibility to recognize, not the children's.
Well, and let me point out, you know, look at it from a different perspective. You know, until the age of 18, children are not considered mature enough to vote in elections, to sign legal contracts like buying a house or taking out a mortgage or what have you. They're not allowed to drive. They're not allowed to drink. And so it strikes me as somewhat odd that then something that has truly lifelong consequences, i.e. marriage, would have a different age range for it.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So someone else asks us, what is the link between child marriage and modern slavery?
Ha! There's a lot of thinking being done about that.
Yes.
So from where I understand, because, you know, people who are experts.
Oh, I believe we have lost Mabel for a moment.
Lose you?
Yeah, you're back.
No, no. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how I can block calls while we do this. So I'll get better instructions the next time. I'll educate myself better. Anyway, we were talking about the link with slavery. What I understand is that not every child marriage is formally a part of slavery, that it depends the circumstances under which the marriage took place, and also then once the marriage has taken place, how the child bride is being dealt with. So some child marriages are considered modern slavery, but not all of them. But obviously there are clear links there in certain cases between, again, girls, mainly girls. I mean, there are some boys who end up in child marriages, not having a choice to choose their own futures and to be free, basically. That's how I understand it. But tell me, Payzee, if you look at it differently.
No, actually, I do agree with a lot of what you said, because, you know, sometimes you have children who are taken out of their homes and they're, you know, taking abroad or taking to another home. And I think as long as you have that sense of the child is taken out of their home to be moved somewhere else, there is definitely a connection to modern slavery. And, you know, I can say in my own case, there definitely would have been that, because I didn't actually have a choice in where I was going. I was just taken to my new home. And, you know, the home that was my safe place was actually, you know, taken away from me, and I was taken somewhere else. So I do believe there is definitely a link there. And unfortunately, in some instances, you know, there will be a very, very strong link.
Yeah.
So we also have, I think we covered this one briefly. Somebody said, how can I help and how will this petition change things? So I think hopefully from what you will have heard from us, anybody who is watching this will be moved enough to do something. I mean, I can't imagine why you would not want to do something about this. I can't imagine why anybody thinks from what we've discussed today, why child marriage benefits anybody, because I've never ever heard of any child marriage case that has benefited anybody, within that situation. I'm talking about the children, and we have to remember we're talking about one of the most vulnerable people in our societies. Child marriage does not benefit children. I've never heard of it. So the reason you should help is because you should want better for children. You should want to see children thrive, and you should want them to chase their opportunities. And, even one child is too many. That's how we have to look at this. We have to look at this as, if we see one child harmed by this, it's too many, and we have to do what we can. So for me, this petition, this will change millions of lives. So you taking a moment from your day, just a minute to sign a petition, just think about the opportunities you are handing back to millions of girls. And that's all it takes. And it's not just this petition. There are so many. And Mabel touched on this. There are many states in America who still have that age of sometimes 14, as young as 14. So all you can, it's simply just signing petitions, showing your support, writing to your MPs, and just showing that this is something that we need eradicated from our societies, and we need to see our children thriving. This is holding millions of girls back.
And if I can add to that, so I think concretely there are 4 things people can do. I mean, there's a lot you can do, but just to kind of make it easy. One is awareness raising, because as you were saying earlier on, there's still too many people who don't know that child marriage exists and don't know what can be done about it. And especially in a time when numbers are going up because of COVID, I think it is really important that we make sure that people are aware. Secondly, I think we need to kind of keep pushing decision makers to keep this issue high on the agenda and translate that into policies, but also into financial commitments. Because if donors now start defunding the money, and the policies include obviously the law. So that's the second thing. Thirdly, like you said, sign that petition especially if you're focused on the UK. If you're in the US, there are now in many states in the US, there are campaigns ongoing in order to push state level change of law. And there's now 3 states where child marriage is no longer possible. But so, kind of contact your own congressman, congresswoman, etc., to help push that. And if you live in other places, go to see the local Girls Not Brides members and see what they're doing and give that support. And then fourthly, anybody who wants to make a financial donation, there's a new initiative that's called VOW to End Child Marriage. VOW, like to take a vow, VOW, which basically is trying to mobilize the entire Western wedding industry in support of ending child marriage. But all the money that they raise goes to a fund that's called the Girls First Fund that helps to get money to grassroots organizations. So that kind of change that needs to happen locally is getting supported if you donate to Vow for Girls. And 100% of your donation will actually go to projects and efforts on the ground. So those are concrete things that people can do. But, for me, one thing is very, very clear. Everybody can be a change maker, but nobody can do it alone. And I am convinced that if we unite and if we make sure that the efforts in the UK to end child marriage, or for that matter in any other country in the world, get more support, get more momentum, then this change can happen. And if we do that, we can then create a place, where everybody, not just girls, but also boys, also women, will be better educated, will be more healthy, and that's a world that is ultimately better for all. So, for me, the message is very simple: help to make sure that girls can be girls and not brides.
Absolutely, very, very clear actions for us all to take. There's actually other people who are asking, what can we do? So there we go. Mabel has given you 4 things that you can do, and there's so much more. So please do help if you can. We also had another question in the comments saying, is there enough influence in the media, not only in the press, but influencers who can put this topic on the front line?
Well, I think more can be done. I mean, I think we need more people to speak up, and that's not just like, very prominent people, anybody. I do think we need more stories in the press. We need more, Girls Not Brides has part of its website has stories about girls. And we're trying to help to get these stories, to give them a wider audience, so that people understand better what this really means for girls. Because it's always, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is very abstract, laws and change and this and that and the other. But when you then read these stories, or when you listen to you, Payzee, but when you read these stories of these girls, it becomes much more tangible in a way. Not just the pains and the horrors of it, but also the change that's possible.
Absolutely, yeah, completely agree. So do look on the website, and as Mabel said, read those stories, because once you hear from the victims, and once you actually hear about what this means to somebody's life, this can't not move you. This is absolutely something that we all would want to change. We also had another question which said, what can teachers do, or what more can teachers do if they've already signed?
So I think teachers can play an incredibly useful role in, first of all, helping to make girls and boys aware of their rights, of the fact that child marriage exists, that is not the right thing to do. But also there are many stories where teachers have played a positive role, in that they realize, either because they notice a change in the behavior of a girl, or because the friends of the girl come to the teacher and say, hey, our friend is apparently going to get married off, where teachers have then reached out to parents and spoken with the parents and helped the parents understand that, for them to take their daughters out of school and have them become child brides is in nobody's interest. And I know of stories about like that in the UK, but I will have heard that countless times, when you travel to Latin America or to Africa or to Asia.
That is so wonderful to hear, Mabel, that there are teachers out there who are doing their part. Unfortunately, in my case, actually, one of the agencies that completely failed me was various teachers who didn't, pick up on what was happening. So I would definitely say to that question, please do continue looking out for the signs and support your students. Be a change maker within your own space, and do what you can, because you will see that girls will not be coming to classes. You will see that girls will disappear from classes. And unfortunately, we so often hear of stories where these children disappear from school and nobody asks about them. So it's really, really vital. And I think, as Mabel said, that teachers play such a key role in these type of issues, and actually supporting girls and talking with them and offering them a safe space, if they need support.
Yeah.
So I think those are all the questions, if I am correct. Yes, I believe so. So I think we can wrap up now, Mabel. We've gone slightly over time, but that's fine. It's been really, really great talking to you, and we really hope that this has been eye-opening and educational for those of you who are listening, and that you will be moved enough to take action. We need you to. So if you have listened to this, we need you to take action.
And can I maybe say one word of last word to close this session?
Of course.
Because I'm as we're talking and thinking again about what people can do, I'm thinking about the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the great activist against apartheid, who then became a great activist on the issue of ending child marriage, and he partially did that because he didn't realize that child marriage is such a big issue in sub-Saharan Africa, and he felt ashamed that he didn't know, and then committed to help to end child marriage. And when I call him Arch, I had the privilege of working with him when I was at the Elders, and I'll never forget when Arch spoke about how hard it can be to be a change maker and to create really great change in the world. And so he said, you have to imagine, if you want to create change, you need a huge wave of change. And then he said, never forget, my child, that a wave of water is composed of millions and millions and millions of little drops of water. And you're one drop, and you're one drop, and you're one drop, and you're one drop. And we're all drops in that wave of change that we're trying to create. And together we make that wave. And I'm personally incredibly honored that I'm working with you, Payzee, and with many of the people who are following this this Instagram live session, and with many people all over the world to collectively create that change. And we owe it to these girls, because I really think every girl, regardless of where she lives, regardless of in which circumstances she was born, regardless of the color of her skin, regardless of her religion, everybody deserves the right to choose whether, when, and whom to marry.
Absolutely. And such an inspiring way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Mabel. I've been honored to speak with you, and definitely leaving this conversation with so much to think about. Thank you so much.
My honor and pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.